Good evening, everybody. Good evening. How's everybody?
Good.
Has everyone had enough to eat? I believe there's some desserts over there and also some hot tea, Indian style. So if you feel like it, and also I think they take it away about in 15 minutes time, so if you want to have it now. My name is Dinu Sen. I'm the president of TiE South Coast, and I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of TiE. 61 chapters in 17 countries, 3,500 charter members. We're the largest entrepreneurship organization in the world, and basically our focus is to support entrepreneurship. I mean, that's to foster entrepreneurship. That's what our mission is all about. We do this through several methods. The first is we have monthly meetings like this where we try and bring topics of interest to everybody, and we have a portion of the meeting which is devoted to networking and some appetizers. Then there's dinner, and then there's a talk, and hopefully we can bring new things to our community. You know, what's happening in terms of technology, in terms of healthcare, in terms of data, and we try and bring panels each month for that. Next month we do not have a panel. We have our summer party, which is just lots of food and actually alcohol as well. It's not over here, it's at Kanobi Martin, it's in the law firm's office. And Preeti, can you remind me, jog my memory about the date?
It is July
22nd.
Tuesday, July 22nd. So it's going to be a lot of fun, lots of food, lots of alcohol, and just a time to mingle and have fun together. The month after that, we're doing something which I think is going to be very interesting. And again, it's the fourth Tuesday of every month. And we're going to talk about the transition from being a corporate executive into entrepreneurship. You know, what are the challenges? What are the things that you need to look at, etc. And so, that too, I think, is going to be a fascinating panel discussion. In addition to meetings like this, we have something called TiE, which is for high school students. We have classes on entrepreneurship. And again, we need mentors for that, so if anyone's interested. Is Rob still here? Where's Rob? Okay. Rob is going to run those classes. He does an outstanding job. He's done it twice before for us. The last time we did it, we had 13 of the local high schools participate in this program. We had about 35 kids, and I think the kids loved it, but we had a real tough time asking the parents to leave. So although we were catering for about 35 kids, typically we had 100 people attending. It's every alternate Saturday from 9 to 12. So again, I'd encourage anyone who wants to volunteer for that effort to please get involved with us. I think, Rob, am I correct in saying that we might have it at the Brady School?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I think parking's a big hassle over there.
Well, it's not a hassle. There's a parking lot right next door. It's just expensive.
Okay, it's expensive. Which is also a hassle. I'd like to mention two of our sponsors, and I've been told that I must mention Qualcomm because there's several people from Qualcomm over here. They're one of our gold sponsors, so we thank Qualcomm. We also have Gary Rayner, who's an entrepreneur who actually started a business and sold it within 5 years of starting it. And it's something called Life Proof. It was basically packaging for cell phones, or the case for a cell phone. Packaging is not the right word. Very, very successful company, and he got bought up. It was a private transaction, so I can't talk about it, but it was many hundreds of millions of dollars. So it was, I think, the return on Life Proof in the last 10 years, it has been the largest return any investor has got in our ecosystem. In 4 years, I think he gave his investors a 65x return. So it's a great story. I also want to acknowledge our charter members. As I mentioned, we have 3,500 charter members around the country, and we have in the South Coast, we have about 70 charter members. And where's Shakila? Shakila gone away? So She told me, you know, I always use the analogy of being a Robin Hood because I steal from these charter members to try and fund these events, TiE, etc., etc. So I've stopped mentioning the charter members individually because it takes away from our main topic, but I'd like to thank all our charter members. They're the ones who make this happen, so thank you all so much. And I think that's all I have in terms of TiE. I now want to introduce Giri, who's going to moderate the panel. Giri Durbakula, and I hope I'm not murdering your name, Giri. If I am, please, I apologize. He's the Chief Information Officer of National Pen, and he's an experienced technology executive. He's worked in retail, in high tech, in CPG, and I'm not quite sure what CPG means, so please don't ask me. And financial services. What does CPG mean?
Consumer packaged goods.
Okay, packaged goods. So I've learned something today. I wanted to know. I always try and learn one or two things of each of them. He's Vice President of Technology. He has served as Vice President of Technology at Petco, where he was responsible for merchandising, e-commerce, supply chain, and marketing. He has a deep background in data and analytics and the application of analytics with customers, marketing, merchandising, supply chain. So hopefully we'll hear some of these and hopefully we'll hear from the rest of the panel too. He has spent his career harnessing the power of data and analytics. He has an undergraduate degree in engineering. Why do all smart people come from an engineering background? In my next life, I'm going to be an engineer, by the way. And he has a graduate degree in management from Washington University in St. Louis, which is a great school. And I'm going to hand it over to Graham.
Thank you. Welcome to tonight's panel. I have the privilege of introducing the panelists before we get started here. From the furthest away from me, his name is Justin Hanuman. He's actually a very good friend of mine. He came the furthest tonight, I believe, came from Atlanta, Georgia. So thank you for coming so far. Great to be here. Justin is, he's been at several companies as well, but currently he's the managing partner for consumer packaged goods and retail for North America for Teradata Corporation. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Teradata. He leads the industry consulting practice. He leads a team of consultants who bring expertise in all aspects of analytics for Teradata to solve business problems across consumer goods and retail. Prior to Teradata, he was at Coca-Cola Refreshments, where he led North American retail business acquisitions. He also held a number of other key positions within Coca-Cola. He's been featured in many numerous publications, including CIO, Smart Money, USA Today, Forbes, and Atlanta Trend, to name a few. He's also authored 2 books, personal branding, that is. One is Make It Happen, and one is Be Extraordinary. And I know Justin from another venue too, in the songwriting and singing as well. That's another topic. That requires alcohol. There's no alcohol tonight, so we're not going to get into that. He holds an industrial engineering degree again, so there's a theme here, and systems engineering degree from Georgia Tech, and an MBA from Auburn University. So please welcome Justin. It's good to be here. To his left is Sid Mohased. Is that right? Okay, good. I think he's known to several of you already. He's very active in the TiE and other organizations in the Orange County area. He also has many years of experience to draw upon. He's currently the Managing Director of Advisory Services for KPMG in Orange County. And his specific focus is he leads the national efforts around data analytics, driven dynamic strategy and execution. That's a long title there, so maybe we can simplify that for this audience. He's the author of the Exerto Strategy Concept Framework for Dynamic Strategy Formulation and Execution Powered by Data Analytics. He was the head of a company called Wise Window, which was acquired by KPMG. So that's how he became to be working for KPMG. Number of industry-leading forums. He's also a adjunct professor at the University of Southern California, Marshall Business School, competition to our colleague here, as well as Argos School of Business and Economics at Chapman University. Prior to Wise Windows, he was the managing director for Venture Farm LLC, a seed funding, so he's managed his own fund. Some of you may know from in the past, he's also been the president of Tech Coast Angels in Orange County, and he's been on several other advisory boards. I think I can go on forever, but I think you get the point. He's got a lot of experience. So please welcome Sid Masa. Lastly, to my immediate right, Shirish Netke, also a good friend of mine from years ago. He is currently the CEO and president of a company called Amberoon, which is a provider of data-driven business perspective solutions, extensive leadership experience in high-growth tech companies, with general management responsibilities over sales, marketing, finance, and operations. In his past, he's been president of Aztec Soft, Absolute Quality, and also CEO for Microland. He's also, at Aztec, he's executed a strategy to position the company as an industry leader, and he's helped grow revenues threefold in that, 24-fold in several months. So before Aztec stuff, he had leadership positions at Sun Microsystems, as well as, and he also began his career at Wipro, which another friend of mine who's here is at Wipro here. So, and he's been quoted in many publications, including the New York Times, IBD, and also Asia Times. So please welcome Shirish Netke. There was a fourth panelist. He sends his apologies and regret to everyone here. His name is Tom Clancy. He represents the venture capital side. Fortunately, he was gracious. He came down with strep throat. So I hate to make him do this, but he actually spent 15 minutes on the phone with me today and shared with me his perspective that he wanted me to speak on his behalf. So during this conversation, I'll intersperse his points of view to make sure you hear that as well. So let's get started. We had a pre-panel workshop a while back to make sure we were prepared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with some general questions to each of the panelists, and then I'll direct some specific questions to the panelists. I'll stop and pause for questions as well during the audience. So please let's make it as interactive as possible. So I'll start with Justin, to you, a general question. So with respect to analytics and big data, just for the group's benefit, describe your overall experience in your current role and the primary activities that you're seeing in this space and what you're doing.
Okay, great. So good to be here again. I lead our industry consulting practice for North America at Teradata, and that's centered on consumer packaged goods. For those that don't know what CPG is, consumer packaged goods. And then also I've got a pretty good number of retailers in our portfolio as well. Gary and I worked together before I was at Teradata. I've been here just over a year actually, and I was at Coca-Cola for 10 years where I built out the North America analytics platform, and then spent a couple years in retail. But the big focus the last, I'd say, year, every week I'm out at least 2 or 3 different companies. Again, in the CPG and retail space, I'd say the big trend has been, as many of you know, the shift of dollars and energy from IT into marketing. I'd say that's one big trend, regardless of whether it's retail or in CPG. The retailers are, for the most part, ahead of consumer packaged goods companies in terms of investment, in terms of looking at technologies, looking at ways of leveraging data. But the CPG companies typically have more budget to spend and more people resources to put against integrating data and leveraging data to make decisions. So I'd say if I had to rank the areas of biggest trend or biggest importance, it would be marketing is where we have the majority of our means, the majority of our energy right now, followed by supply chain or integrated data, so the handoffs between consumer goods companies and retailers and how those companies operate together. And then after that, I'd say it would probably be finance or those types of areas. But for us, that's really what's trending right now across the industry.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Sid, same question for you. Describe your overall experience in your current role and what you're seeing out there in the big data analytics space.
What I generally say is a big confusion. The word big data is going around all over the place. Data analytics is going out you ask, I bet you if you ask 10 people in the audience, they'll give you 10 different answers of what it is. And this confusion, I think, offers two things. One, it offers an opportunity, because I think opportunity, now I'm going to put out my entrepreneur hat, wherever there's chaos, there's an opportunity. And that opportunity can be harnessed by executives, by companies that are a little bit forward thinker and they don't get lost in the message or in the various tools and capabilities that's being offered. What I'm focused on, so I like to think that's trending. It's not trending, actually. I'm usually a little bit ahead of the game. I think that a lot of the data and applications are being applied to tactical situations. Optimize the cost, optimize the churn, get the customer to buy this versus that, utilize those kind of applications. Now, and I'm going to the applications as opposed to the tools and technologies that provide those capabilities. Where I believe that the real opportunity is on the strategy side. If you go to the, look at, Gartner has a big research. Yeah, no, they have a research that they say that data analytics has multiple phases to it. The first phase they call the second is diagnostics, I believe. It's descriptive, which is, okay, I've got this thing, now what? Got the data. The second is kind of diagnostic. So what happened? Why did this thing happen? The third is predictive. Okay, let's predict into the future of what's going to happen. And the last piece is what they call prescriptive, or what should happen. So my opinion is, and my friends at Gartner have disagreed with me, is that you should first start with what should happen, and then begin to optimize how you tactically win those things. So I believe that's where the field is headed. Okay,
thanks, Sid. Sharice, same question to you. What are you seeing in the space, and describe your overall experience and what you're seeing as trends?
So I think the conversation around big data is largely divided between the consultants who are talking about the vision and the promises of the future, like the McKinsey report and all that kind of stuff, and the technology vendors who are trying to sell you software or hardware or a combination of things. No disrespect to either one of them, but neither of them is squarely answering the question about what's the ROI or line of sight of ROI for the business manager. And that's kind of is the, I guess, the state of the industry right now, primarily because it's in the early stages. So there is the big vision, there is the technology, but like, what do I do tomorrow morning? How do I take big data to solve my competitive advantage? How do I get advantage of that? That's an issue which is not being addressed right now. And kind of to second what Sid mentioned, that is the opportunity right now. And we talk to a lot of customers, we talk to them about solutions, we talk to them about strategy, but the real value is in how do you translate that into money? How do you translate the competitive advantage? Having said that, we talk to a lot of people as well who are actually implementing this stuff. And the smarter people are actually focused on just that, on how they can use data to get competitive advantage over them. They're not so kind of bogged down by the technology or by the bigger, grander vision. They're into executing and, in a sense, getting some kind of tactical advantage, acquiring the knowledge of how to manage this kind of a technology, this capability, and then create an execution plan around that. But those are kind of few and far between. So this is again typical for an early stage of an industry.
So I want to build on that. So in the 8 to 10 months ago, a lot of our customers were setting up big data committees, big data groups, cross-functional teams to figure out what big data meant to the company. Those ended, and now in a lot of our meetings, they don't even want us to use the words big data because there's so much confusion and so much hype around the term. And then the other thing that you mentioned is interesting, and there was conversations about this earlier, is a lot of the technology leaders are looking to try things, to do POCs, proofs of concept, proofs of value, versus making big and upfront investments because they're not sure what they're truly going to get out of the integration of data or the utilization of data. So the whole business value thing, I think, is key.
Yep.
So Gary, we may not get to your list of questions.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I think it's important, this whole, what is big data? It goes to the part of the overall confusion. If you go back 30 years ago, people were doing, handwritten financials, and it was, they'll get to the bottom of it, and it wasn't balancing, and it was difficult. So imagine a Coca-Cola doing everything manually with all the additions and deletions. Guess what? That was big data. So somebody came up with the DBase2, and they did an accounting thing, and they solved that problem. Then they came out with, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this with a lot of other data? And then they came out with an Excel or 123 Lotus, and they solved that big data problem. Then we had, wouldn't it be great if we could get our supply chain data in there? And then it was, Oracle came about, and they came out with this relational database to solve that problem. And now we have unstructured data. We have we started having a button with Amazon in every corner in every home that they could, more data. It was big data. And now you've got the unstructured stuff, which is bigger data. It's always been big data. This is not new.
Different flavor, yeah. So let me try a different question here. So when you ask the question, what are some of the new cool innovations that we're seeing out there, or maybe that we've heard of or haven't heard of? I'm going to go first to represent Tom's perspective. So, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues here. So what Tom wanted me to share with you is that a lot of innovations happening in search, specifically in the embedded search. Google changed the search algorithm recently to Hummingbird, which essentially shook the very foundation which the search engine optimization is built upon. And then making it more specific search as opposed to semantic search. Semantic search is really, and semantic search and graph search where it has underlying embedded algorithms are really changing the way people think of search in general. The second thing is embedded intelligence. This whole thing about wearables or about cybersecurity. We're seeing a lot more predictive analytics at the very core of products that are really thinking, how can we embed the intelligence into this, whether it be a software, whether it be a device, collecting data, making it so to solve, to your point earlier, solving some sort of business problem that we can capture data using these wearables or something that's embedded. So those are two things to build on as far as what are we seeing that's new, that's innovating. Trish, I'll start with you. What are you seeing that's new, that's being innovations in space?
So actually, before I answer that question, let me just address what the point that Sid made earlier about it's old wine and new bottle or a variation of the same. That one thing is true is that around 2009, 2010, there was a big discontinuity in the market, in the sense that companies like Google, Yahoo, and Facebook, they made open source to a lot of technologies which are kind of critical to what the change is taking place. And those technologies are relatively hard to understand, and they are immature. So people who've taken advantage of those right now are the ones who are actually getting a lot of competitive advantage. There is a discontinuity, but it is hard to try to execute. Now, going back to the, Giri's question about solutions where people have done good stuff. So the guys who are winning right now are folks who are actually taking that technology and keeping it under the hood from the customers and actually creating a business solution to that. And I'll give you a good example of that is, if you guys have heard of a company called Climate Corp. They just got, so Climate Corp came out of Google. They did weather predictions, and instead of selling weather predictions, what they did was they sold insurance to farmers based on weather predictions. And that was their business model. So they didn't come in and say, here's a technology, good luck with it. They said, we're underwriting that. So their investors, included Google Ventures, Khosla Ventures, and all these guys, they were sold for, I think, close to $1 billion valuation last year to Monsanto, who used that technology to incorporate in their business of agricultural predictions. So here's an example of somebody who said, yeah, this technology is complex, let me do this, let me solve a real business problem, and that is they solved an actuarial problem, an insurance problem, and use that to do that. I would say that's kind of an area of innovation, which is where the future is going to be. Another example, which I would say very different area, is in nonprofits and social works. There's a company, a nonprofit called is DataKind. You guys heard of DataKind? They provide services to NGOs, or data analytics services to NGOs. So they have the equivalent of hackathons, where people volunteer their time to create a data analytics solution for NGOs who cannot afford the time. So these are like top-notch consultants donating their time. Kind of not too different from the open source movement, but people are really good at what they do. They hack it out for about a weekend or a week, and they create solutions for NGOs. Those are examples of people using the technology to do something which is practical and beneficial, focused very specifically on the solution at hand as opposed to the technology and implementing it. So those are two examples which has come to the fore because they focus on, I guess, the end result as opposed to the underpinnings of the underpinnings of the smaller parts of the technology.
Thanks, Sri. Sid, what about you? What are some innovations you're seeing out there?
Sure. I think Tom is absolutely right about the whole revitalization, whatever you want to call it, of the SEO business. There's got to be some changes there. There's also the security stuff is pretty prevalent because of this whole privatization, not only because you and I want to make sure that our data is private, but when you get to the company level, there are opportunities to monetize that data, and the question is, how do you privatize it, anonymize it, and secure it, or across the other areas of security. But in my opinion, the big innovations are going to come in visualization. I think visually, we have a lot of math now and a lot of tools. I was telling my 93-year-old father, he asked me about 30 some odd years ago, he says, what's your degree, what do you do? I said, I have an operations research degree. And he said, so what do you do with it? So I finally told him about a couple of years ago, I said, I think I figured out what I do with it. I'm not, for some reason. So there's a lot of math and a lot of products now, but I think what's missing is that visualization components, and that's not BI visualization, that's discovery visualization, that very quickly you can narrow down and get to the insights and then change your frame of reference constantly to be able to be sharpened to the point. So I think that's where the big next generation billion-dollar companies are going to be there.
That's great. What about you, Justin?
Okay. I'll talk to a couple different perspectives. So from a retail perspective, the challenge is, and you probably all know this, is still getting traffic to store and keeping traffic in store, right? Because of the whole trend of omni-channel, which has been, I'd say, the hot buzzword in retail the last 2 or 3 years. Retailers have had to change their typical brick and mortar approach, primarily because of Amazon and others that are being disruptive, and be able to serve a customer regardless of the channel. So you've got retailers that have outlet stores, physical stores, an e-commerce channel, and then international locations today that are all operating in silos primarily because that's how they all were developed. So retailers that are, I'd say, the more advanced ones are the ones that are integrating consumer data so that they can know the consumer, and then we'll very quickly get to a point with all of the technology that we have to offer real-time offers in store, to recognize a consumer. Obviously payment is going through a lot of changes today. So I do think there'll be innovation there, and that is going to trend very quickly. On the consumer goods side, so a lot of these companies are, I'd say, much further behind, and I could categorize them into the very few that are really investing and moving forward, big chunk that are status quo, and then a number that I'd say are falling behind. And it's interesting that you brought up the visual analytics component, because I was actually thinking of one trend that I do see every week right now is everyone wants to talk about Tableau and Spotfire, and I know those are the tools, but there's still visual analytics, and so then it leads into, in our area, it's like a tool called Aster, and how you look at information and do algorithms on data and visually think about information. So that is trending. I'd say the other thing in CPG is the idea of going direct to consumer. So typically, consumer goods companies have to rely on retailers to provide them information on what's happening in the store. And so what CPG companies would like to do, like P&G is doing today, is get closer to the consumer so they understand preferences, so they understand what decisions are being made, market basket information and whatnot in real time, so that instead of planning marketing campaigns every 6 to 7 months, they can be doing it much more frequently. So things that are going to be impacted by that will be things like ad buying, and so the whole marketing process around that is shifting with better access to consumer data.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. So, let me turn the question to Shirish for a second. Clearly, analytics is getting to be more mainstream. Certainly, the whole big data is still, there's a lot of confusion out there. But when you have a company like Cloudterra, which just through Intel Capital was raised $900 million, that's clearly becoming mainstream. But yet, at the same time, the dichotomy is, while investment community is seeing it, and sort of they're leading the way there, companies like myself or companies which are far bigger than our company, still the actual practical application of analytics and getting it off the ground and having a sponsor and organizing and doing something around some organizational momentum is still very lagging behind. So you've recently talked to a lot of companies, many different roles. Who's leading the charge in big data analytics in companies, and how is that getting off the ground?
That's actually a very interesting question there. When it comes down to the practical implementation of it, what Giri is referring to is a study we did for the Sandel Group about 6 months ago, where we talked to about 170 people, 25 of them were CXOs, to understand exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it. And the response was, and it shouldn't be surprising, it came down to like 3 or 4 basic things, and it's kind of similar to, I guess, not surprising considering that we're talking about a discontinuing technology. They're talking about simple things like the people. We call it PACE. We call it the people. That is, you have to convince the people in the organization that this is what needs to be done. It's the vision that goes with it. Then the approach. I think you mentioned earlier. It has to be a business-driven approach. It's not a technology-led approach. It has to be based on getting some kind of an ROI or getting to a certain goal, doing things which could not be done before. Another thing which came out was, 2 things which came out apart from that was making a decision on the core technology platform. It's not that you do lead with the business approach, but the core technology platform is critical because people are at the fork in the road between actually going on one way versus the other. It's like ETL versus ELT, or what they call it, virtual data warehousing, all that stuff right now. People have to make kind of decisions that they're going to have to live with for a very long time right now. So that core technology platform is people are thinking very long and hard about. And the last thing is the technology ecosystem. It's, gone are the days like 15, 20 years ago when you said you abdicated your responsibility and said IBM will do everything for me, or SAP is going to take my ERP and do all of that. People are now saying, well, I have to live with my decision, so I don't go with just vendor, but I go with an ecosystem of vendors who are going in a certain direction. So one of the things we found after talking to a lot of people is the way they are implementing big data, at least the successful ones, who are applying the fundamental principles of how a company is run or how new products are implemented. And it could just as well be applied, let's say, 15 years ago to web or e-commerce or whatever. It's people approach with the business, the computing, the technology platform, and the ecosystem of vendors. That's what it came down to. So it has not been talked about in the big data reports. It's not talked about in the technology reports anywhere.
Right. But that's the what.
Yeah.
Who's the evangelist? Who's bringing it to the forefront? Is this a board level conversation? Where is it being talked about?
Well, actually, it is a board level conversation because those are the guys who are getting all the high level implementation. And the interesting thing is there is a newer kind of a title evolving called the Chief Analytics Officer, and that guy is not. And he can be called by different names, Chief Data Officer or whatever. And the labels don't really matter as much. But this person is a business person, not the CIO or the technical guy. And he gets his direction from the technologist. I mean, he's aware of the technologies, that means he knows what's possible. But he gets his direction primarily from the business, from the board and from the CEO. And the thing we are seeing changing is the more enlightened companies are actually separately putting budget and funding around the CAO function or the Chief Analytics Officer function. And that guy is like business-driven, independent budgets, and he's kind of we used to talk about grow your business and run your business budget. The CIO has the run your business budget, so like everything from email to phones and all is his responsibility. The grow your business budget goes to the CEO, and he's typically a business person, not a technologist.
Justin, you have a point of view, sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because I mean, there's very few actually that have taken that step to put the CAO in place, and those are the ones that I mentioned, that those buckets that I'd say are investing and leading forward, right? They're the ones that have a leader there that knows enough about IT and can interface, but also knows the business or can talk to the business and is a trusted advisor to the business. So no doubt that's there. I'd say the other one that I'm seeing in terms of companies investing, I'm working with a big retailer up in Portland, Oregon, and instead of calling it big data in terms of the work they're doing, they are bringing in data scientists, and so the trend around finding resources.
You mean Beaverton, right?
What?
Beaverton, right?
Right, Beaverton, Oregon. The trend around working to find people that can actually think beyond the typical business analyst is, I'd say, a challenge. And so, again, in the consumer goods space, you have a lot of folks who know how to download data, run reports, and access in Excel. But actually being able to think beyond that and ask the deeper question is where they're resource constrained. And it's not easy to find the individuals out there that can think that way. And so, but that's a way that some of the companies we're working with, including the retailer in Beaverton, are looking to change the game in terms of analytics.
Okay, great. Sid, let me ask you a question here. So you have the unique perspective of not only being on the advisory services of a big 4 or big 6 or whatever they're calling it now, in services, but also you've actually started your own company, you've run your own fund. So from the VC perspective, and I have a few things from Tom, but I want to get your thoughts as well. What are you seeing out there as far as investments and opportunities that are still unmet, that haven't been addressed yet? The whole, what are they seeing in terms of the innovation space for the investment community today?
I think, simply put, the market is hot.
Yep.
There's lots of money going all over the place.
Yep.
There is a gap between the very early stage, people thinking about this idea and that idea. In the old days, it was a little more difficult. You had to get systems, you had to get equipment, you had to get this, that. Now you know, $20, you're up on the cloud. You get a bunch of, all sorts of, free, open source stuff, and you begin to kind of build things. So what that does is then, your cousins and your second cousins and the guy who's good at buying real estate in your family, they've got a bunch of money and say, hey, Sid is a happening guy, he's a smart guy. So they get a little bit of money, and what happens is that now you've got lots of people with a lot of similar ideas, small modification. But then graduating them to the next level becomes a difficult thing. Now what we're seeing, and this is different than what it was, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, when the boom, the internet boom. Now you've got a flood of things coming in, and so the VCs are very busy looking at all this stuff. But then they pick a few, and what they're doing, which is different, is they're really backing up with big money. So you're seeing $100 million investment as opposed to $20 million investments or $10 million investments. They are really backing up a horse in a different way than it was done before.
What is the unique calling card and unique value prop that those ones have?
The ones that are able to... first, they solve a very, very prevalent problem. That means the dogs are eating the dog food the next day. It's not... I'm building some vision for, and this is because I think the disease that we all got from the Facebooks of the world or the internet world. It's going up every day. It has to double or triple. And the Teradata business, it took a long while. You sold one thing at a time. It took time. It took patience. It took money. It took iteration. But we're used to getting. Let's get a lot of people online, and it's working. So we are expecting that quick adoption, quick return. I think the other thing that's kind of, if you would, you mentioned what's the opportunity? I think a big opportunity is in data cleansing. About 60% of the data scientist's time is spent on cleaning the data.
So aggregating it, cleaning it, making it relevant.
It's different than here's a database and let me see. This one is in column number 14 and this is making it ready so that you can do analytics on it that delivers value. That's a big monstrous thing, and that kind of goes to my visualization kind of thing. I think it is and it's a hard problem to solve. It's not easy. It's a very, very hard problem to solve, where everybody is kind of saying, okay, I've got the data, it's clean, let's put it through Teradata, let's put it through business objects, let's put it through XYZ, let's display it, let's put it through Tableau and make it look good. This thing that's coming in is contaminated, and guess what? It can never be, and this is another problem that I see with a lot of clients, is that they are thriving, spending a lot of money. One guy they were spending $300 million in cleaning their data, connecting all their databases, right? Now, this is a river, and this river is constantly being polluted from upstream. There's new data coming in, new versions of it, new forms of it, it's constantly being contaminated. So there's no, hey, we spent $300 million and this is nirvana, we got to perfect data. It's just an illusion. So I think data cleansing is the place to go. I don't think that there is, I haven't seen, and if anybody has seen it, please let me know. I haven't seen any companies that are truly making strides there.
Okay.
One quick addition to that, it's interesting, I think the big guys are being really challenged right now. So SAP, Oracle, Teradata, IBM, that had this traditional hardware and software business model, hardware, software, services model, and you have these fast-moving entrants in the data management space, the reporting side. They're creating chaos and slowing down the sales cycle for a lot of these IT decision makers. And so then you have these big behemoths, monolithic is the word we use for our own, what we were and what we don't want to be. But the challenge is, what do? Do you acquire? Do you change? Do you go all cloud? Do you change your business model for what could be a blip, or do you change your business model thinking this is the new future? And I think that's definitely something that's out there for the big guys that are kind of the historical BI, data warehousing leaders, I'll call it.
There's two companies I just want to give information on that are somewhat local, regional here. Of course, I forgot, some of you might know, this company used to be called DriveCam, but what's it called now? Lytex. So, for those of you who don't know what it is, that's a practical example of analytics, and Jacob probably knows a lot more about it than I do, but analytics embedded in a device that actually sits in your car. Typically, it's a fleet-based service like taxi truck drivers, and it tracks your driving patterns and driving behaviors, and there's a predictive nature to see if you brake too much, if you veer too much, are you sleepy, are you drinking and driving, are you not alert, and then it puts a predictive pattern on your propensity to get into an accident. That'll increase your risk profile, more insurance required to make you more capable driver, and that has blossomed. I actually worked at DriveCam as a consultant for many years ago. I know the name has changed and it's gotten quite big. Lytex.
Like analysts.
Drew Martin, a good friend of mine, is the CIO there, and he couldn't make it tonight. Otherwise, he could have spoken more about that. That's a good example of a local company. There's another company called LiveSave, LIFESAV, and if I understand it correctly, that actually, it's a predictive analytics. It predicts patients before they actually go into septic shock. 50% of patients who are in a hospital at some point in time go into some sort of a shock. This predicts if that person has a propensity to go into shock. Not only can it help save lives, but also can actually cut down a tremendous amount of costs on the medical care from a hospital institution perspective. So that's a couple of examples that are somewhat local. I'm sure there are many others, but the point is, people are doing things, they're coming up with new ideas, they're innovating, and they're making a difference for people. I mean, just out of curiosity, how many people in this room, as we speak right now, are wearing some sort of wearable, some sort of analytics device right now? I know my friend Anil is, but did anyone see what Anil's wearing today?
Looks like
Can you turn around?
And
He's got the Google Glass on.
And the watch.
And the watch. I have my Fitbit on. It tracks every step I do. The only thing it doesn't do, here's an idea, is that how can it be aware of what I'm ingesting, so I don't have to actually log on my app what I've eaten. That's the only thing it doesn't do. But it logs my steps, my calories burned, and then I put in my activities in my diet. But that's pretty good. So I'm sure many of the others have some applications in this.
Gary,
yeah.
just building on what you
Yeah,
said,
sure. Go
because
ahead.
I failed to mention it. I think there is a whole big movement, and this has significant hardware, software, it's got lots of implications. It's this whole idea of Internet of Things.
Yes, IoT.
Which is, the idea is essentially in every device, everything that we have, there could be a sensor. And this sensor would provide a signal. And that signal could then be captured by another machine that you could do analytics on. It's in your, the utility companies are putting it in your meter so nobody needs to come over there. They can adjust the power purchase, they can adjust the power that comes to you. Now imagine if I've got that power measurement, I can also know when you turned on your TV. And guess what? That data is significant for the retailers that want to know, okay, in this region, in this particular areas, with this kind of income, how do they pattern their, and these things can go on and on and on and on. In the insurance industry, for example, you mentioned the car thing. There's lots of devices like Progressive and Allstate, all those guys have devices that they put in your car, which measures how you drive. And based on that, then they give you a discount on your insurance. Now imagine, can they use that same data? Now insurance companies are not in the business of selling data,
Right.
but if they capture that data, and they own that data, you just gave them the authority to own it.
Right.
Now they can sell that data to the leasing companies who want to know what your rate should be.
Yep.
Should you get a 4.2% or a 1.3 because they don't know how you drive. And then they can call you
About that.
6 or 7 months into the thing and say, hey, your car is a good candidate to be
Right.
repurchased.
Right. So that's actually a great segue into my next question. Let's talk a little bit about privacy. All this data is being collected and aggregated and filtered and manipulated and mined and analyzed and whatever the verb you want to use there. But some of it is with our explicit permission. Some of it is ignorance is bliss. They're doing it. We don't know anything about it. Some of it is we know what they have. We try like hell to stop them doing what they're doing. But despite our efforts, it's happening. So the lines are getting blurred. I'd like to address each of you, have you each address your thoughts on privacy. How are the lines getting blurred? What's going on there to stand up for the consumers, to prevent this from getting out of control, and what are the companies doing to take advantage of this?
So I'd say along the lines of privacy, I think my previous boss, McNeely, from Sun here, said privacy is over, get over it. I mean, there's no such thing. That's like, he was basically espousing a technology point of view. Like anybody who wants to get something, they can get it. But on a more serious note, what's really important in the next generation, and I'm glad you mentioned the Internet of Things, is a governance model and an accountability model. That if you do have access to the data, what are the checks and balances in place to make sure that it is used in a manner which is appropriate and which is what it should be for. I mean, we talk about NSA and Snowden and all that stuff. The fact that, let's say, a low-level person can have access to that much data is not a technology, don't blame the technologists for it, that's a governance issue. And data governance is a management and a business problem rather than a technology issue. So to answer your question, I would say let's not be too bothered about privacy. If somebody wants to get the information, they can get it. There are ways of preventing it, but aggregation, there's a lot of information that's available right now. The bigger issue is there a governance model which restricts entitlements, which restricts the access of data to people who should have it, as versus those who should not have it, and that's requires a lot of thought and a lot of consideration to implement, and it's not a technology problem.
And are we at the nation stages of that? Have we figured that out yet? Or
I guess the smarter people are working on that right now, and I would say the smartest people are, and they don't have an answer for it. But what they're trying to do is create solutions which makes governance easier, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah.
I think the last thing you should do is, which people tend to do, is talk about the technology invasion. The fact that you've got a phone here, that means you can predict with 90% accuracy what you're going to do on Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. That data is already out there. You've got that location thing on your iPhone going. So just get over the fact that people are watching. The question is, what are they going to do with it? And we're still in the early stages.
Sid, what are your thoughts on this issue?
I agree with my friend here. First of all, it's an extremely complicated issue. It's very complicated. It's got 1,000 legs and arms and goes all over the place, and it's very, very complicated. And I think everybody may seem to approach it from, hey, let's have a better security system, let's protect this, do that. And I think there are probably smarter hackers than there are technologists out there. They like to hack it. So you come up with this methodology, they come up with this one to break it, you come up with another one. It's not going to be solved with a technology problem. Some of it is governance, as you mentioned. And I think the other is business models that may evolve, such as something like escrow companies that would take your data, anonymize it, give it back to you, and you don't know, because if you anonymize it yourself, that's a problem. If you give it to me and I anonymize it, and then I give it to you, I don't know what the original thing was. You gave it to me anonymized. I used a series of things that gave it, so it's kind of secure. But that's a business model issue. It's not a technology issue. So, and there are tons of other ways of doing these things that may solve those problems, but they're not technology issues.
Justin, what are your thoughts on this? This is, I'm sure, affecting retailers and CPG in a big way.
Yeah, so I'll just say, agree with everything, and so what we're having to do, we're spending as much time in the consumer goods world on data governance as on the technology, as you were just saying. But it's interesting because every country has their own privacy policies and their own policies around opt-ins and their own policies around storage of personally identifiable information, or PII data. And so we're having to solve that. We're having to become a solution provider around security of information, for example, around consumer, as much as a provider of technology and software and services and whatnot. So it's definitely shifted our approach to be more solution sales focused, especially where we touch any sort of consumer data or any sort of customer data, however you want to call it. In the retail world, the focus has definitely been more on technology of securing the data versus data governance, I think, from a retail perspective. But there's a lot of noise out there now because of all the breaches and whatnot. And I agree, the technology for hacking is moving faster than the companies that are investing in security. So we'll see more. We'll see definitely more issues in the coming year or two.
Let me give you a sort of an example to illustrate what I mentioned earlier and what the other speakers referred to as well. I mean, how many of you have been to Israel lately? Tel Aviv? Anyone? In the recent past. One of the things that they don't, it's easier to get in than to get out. And when you leave the country, there's a whole what are called pattern of life questions asked. About what do you do, where do you go? And LL, they have kind of the lowest rates of whatever, terrorism or any kind of bombs or anything happening at the airport. Because the way they analyze data based on somebody's propensity to be a crook or a terrorist is based on an analysis of a pattern of life, what kind of questions they ask and what kind of answers they get. They don't open your bags and make you take off your shoes and your clothes and invade your privacy in a lot of different ways to arrive at that conclusion. They just look at your pattern of behavior. So now that's an example of an orthogonal approach as opposed to a brute force approach to the problem. I mean, you mentioned earlier about, you can hack it, you can actually put a secure firewall around all that. But firewall is such an obsolete concept, it's almost funny that you can put all that kind of stuff around it, but there are weaknesses which we'll never be able to conquer. Instead of that, if you look at patterns, you look at different ways in which it can be implemented or put in governance, that's a much better way of approaching the problem, because you try to do it the brute force way, it's not going to work anyway.
We have in the audience a mixture of people who are in the corporate world, people who are budding entrepreneurs. So let's turn the question around to, I guess, depending upon who answers the question, you can take either side. What advice would you give for people who are either trying to create the next big thing from a company in this space, or be starting to be this evangelist and champion in a corporate environment?
Let me see if I can answer that in a simple way. First is,
Simple is good, yes.
simple is good. I would say focus on the business fundamentals and try to avoid the technology for its own sake, like the plague, because that doesn't mean you shouldn't be aware of the technology, but focus on the fundamentals of your business. And not only just business, but your business. What does your business do? What is your business's unique value? And figure out how new technologies can actually help you drive competitive advantage. That is the single most thing we found as standing out of people who are successfully implementing big data. They were very specifically focused on getting competitive advantage. Everything else was kind of secondary or tertiary to that.
Justin, what about you?
Yeah, what business problem are you trying to solve? What are the options for solving it? Then what are the technology enablers? And that is such a different conversation for people that work at a company like mine to walk in and to do, quite frankly, because they walk in and they're typically used to saying why you should buy a piece of hardware, why you should buy cloud, so the very tool and technology specific. And instead, you've got to change the conversation, even internally, to what business problem we're trying to solve, and find an area of the business. If I were back at Coca-Cola, it's finding the business sponsor, the brand manager, the brand leadership, the marketing team, the retail sales team that has a burning need for something, or an analytic-driven type capability, or a need for data that they don't have today. Understand that business problem, then understand how you can bring solution to that problem without getting all hung up in the technology. At Coke, it was always an interesting thing because we had to share what we were building and deploying and rolling out solutions, whether it be MicroStrategy or ProClarity or Tableau. And anytime we went to the technology and started talking about reporting tools or features, functions, we lost the business people in seconds. And so we really had to talk about what was it that they were going to get out of the solution to solve a problem that they were dealing with today. And that was our number one priority. So if I were in a corporate organization, that's the way I'd focus on it. If you're in a technology organization, it's how do you go out and talk to a solution to a business problem, not go out and talk to your tools and wares that you're selling.
So maybe you can, from the entrepreneurial aspect, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, they're kind of different. If you look at the corporate world, and in that case, I think the issue should be driven down from the business perspective, from the CEO's office. There has to be what I call an urgency or a drum about the issue that we're going to lose competitiveness. This is not just this too shall not pass. This is big enough that's going to crumble us. And then focus on the organizational and the rhythm of the organization that's facts-based, analytics-based, as opposed to, well, my gut says, well, it's good, but let me enhance your gut by giving you some facts, by giving you more color around things. And lastly, on the corporate side, is create small wins. Create small wins. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to solve all ills of society. Don't go after selecting this and that, and gobbling it up all together, solving it after 5 years. This is a different world, and other people are getting incremental success. If you look at it from the entrepreneur perspective, who's starting off a company, I think focusing on the value that you're delivering is the key. I think the era of verticalization is here. You need to focus on an industry, data analytics stuff. You get the results much faster. There are things that are platform, kind of things. There was an era, everything wanted to be platform. Now, if you want to have a platform, have it for an industry, so that you get to know that industry, you get to know the player, you get to understand the pain points. And again, my colleagues also mentioned, it's not about the technology. I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday, and we were talking about the natural language processing technology there's a super duper and they're pushing it. I said, do you think that the guy who's looking at the stuff cares if you have a 62% accuracy or a 64% accuracy? It doesn't matter to him. Are you giving him something that it has value to him? Yeah, it's important to have the right stuff, But the priorities has to be in, are they getting value from the 62% and then enhance it to 64%? So that would be my.
So that's an excellent point. I just want to read you a couple of comments that Tom shared for me. Certainly from the funding perspective, he certainly sees there's a tremendous opportunity to solve business problems. But to your point, Sid, you've got to stay focused, have a specific domain expertise that you're bringing to bear, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in the security business, financial services. And you have to really ensure that you're focusing on some sort of differentiated value proposition. He sees tons of companies every day in his job, but very few, and invariably every product that he's seen has something to do with analytics. Everything collects data. But what are you doing with it that's different from everyone else? How are you going to sustain and really have real, true staying power is the key. And you mentioned platforms. And we have Teradata on the panel, so he can certainly chime in on this too. There's been a lot of companies like Data Allegro or Green Plum, etc., that have come, maybe haven't quite gone, but I would say haven't delivered on the huge multiples that we thought they would. Then there's companies like Netezza and Teradata keeps buying things or growing bigger, but they've got staying power. And to be a true force in the market and really get into the corporate conversations, you mentioned, can you flip it and be up in the software as a service or in the cloud, which is great to an entry point. But for staying, you've got to have infrastructure, you've got to have investments, you've got to have the ability to sales, because invariably, as I like your perspective on this, they're very long sales cycles. So not every company is going to be able to sustain all these months after months after months discussions, because to your point earlier, it's a board conversation. You and I both know that those conversations aren't overnight conversations, right? So it really have to have some staying power. Would you agree?
Totally. I mean, the sales cycle for Teradata, Oracle, SAP is at least 16, 18 months for a major purchase. That's standard. So you got salespeople. I mean, can you imagine waiting a year to sell something? Oh my gosh. And so that's a challenge. And for the monolithic, the big guys, and I think that will still be a challenge. The sales cycles may, I don't know, it's not decreasing, it's only increasing again because of the noise in the market. The other challenge is, if you're Teradata and you're going to meet with the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, they say, why are you Teradata? You should be over IT. And so there's a whole branding issue, not just us, others, that hey, we're actually the leaders in marketing because we bought our Primo. But you'd never know that. And so you have a lot of acquisition happening at all these big companies, and so they have to really rebrand themselves, even though their nomenclature or brand is IT. So yeah, another challenge.
Let me give the audience an opportunity to chime in with some questions. We have microphones that we can push around and or rotate around. Okay, gentleman on the right, left, right, my left.
Hello, is it working? Yes, good. Hi, my name is John Garrison. I'm with Perkin-Elmer. We provide Spotfire for research use and other life science applications. And I'd like to pick up on something that I heard the panel say and partly use my personal experience to partly confirm, but also, if I may, partly contrast or contradict. Because you were talking about sort of beginning with the end in mind. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but basically, what, and I was talking to one of our other guests, Ray, here, and we were talking about the importance of understanding how you're going to make a decision out of that data, right? Because the data is great, but what are you going to do with it, right? And this is something that I counsel with our customers all the time is, well, if the end result is A is bigger or B is bigger, how are you going to act differently? Because if the answer is, well, I'm going to do the same thing, then who cares whether A was bigger or B was bigger? It didn't lead to business insight, right? It didn't lead to change. So in that part, that's my confirmatory part. But my contradictory part, I'd like to get your reaction, is sometimes I think there's something that's just discovery, and we don't know what we want to know yet. So my boat crashed, I'm on a desert island. Okay, I may be looking for shelter, I may be looking for food. Some things are obvious, but I don't know what's on this island. I don't know if there's somebody has left behind a flare gun, or, I don't know what's here yet. So if I just search out looking for palm trees and I'm blind to the banana trees, or coconut trees and I'm blind to the banana trees, or what have you, you get my point. I could be missing a lot of insight. And I think that that's one of the strengths of Spotfire visualizations is it's very user-driven to ask, well, this is a different question than what I originally meant to ask, what I was going to ask IT to set up for me, but I'll do some self-service. So I'd like to get your thoughts on sort of, that idea of just exploring your data without a preconceived notion or a foregone conclusion about what you're going to do with the data.
Let me see if I can do a quick answer to that. And you mentioned PerkinElmer and Spotfire. A very important use case in the current scenario is not knowing what you're looking for. So then you have the Rumsfeld idea of known knowns and known unknowns and unknown unknowns, all that kind of stuff. This is like the unknown is kind of really important. However, and from experience we've seen is that even though you're talking about unknown unknowns, you have to bind it in certain context. It can't be completely unknown. And we've done this practically where we've taken like a huge amount of data, put zero constraints, no boundaries whatsoever on it, and we got absolute garbage. Then you put some contextual sort of constraints on it, it becomes much more easy to read. If you take your case for example, I know PerkinElmer does provide Spotfire to life sciences. Now, the reason why I would go to PerkinElmer is because you have an understanding of that industry better than probably even going to TiE or somebody else who's selling Spotfire, because you put a bit of a boundary around it. So to answer your first question, the unknown is a very important use case because it requires a little bit more, it just brings out things which were not possible before. And a lot of it is through visualization, as my panelist mentioned here, and you mentioned also in the context of Spotfire. And the third thing is, from a practical point of view, you do have to put some context, put some boundaries around it to make it real. But the unknown is going to be a much more important use case going forward than it has ever been before.
Let me comment on that because I was the one who mentioned that you need to start with the prescriptive context as opposed to kind of going through, hey, I'm going to diagnose and so forth. And that actually is extremely discovery driven. And this is part of the confusion that when you talk about analytics or predictions and things of that sort, there's so many different points of views that it's hard to kind of contextual it properly. So let me look at it from, for example, in Predictive Analytics books, Eric Siegel and so forth, talk about optimizing a marketing situation or sales situation. In that context, you do need to have a particular optimization scenario in mind. I need to sell more shoes. That is what you're optimizing against. Now, you could discover, turn this around visually, mathematically, decision trees, whatever it is, to find, okay, when they're buying water, they're also buying shoes. Okay, then that's something, classify the groups into different things. So that is not what I was indicating, and he's absolutely right. If you don't have any constraints, put it around it, industry-related constraints, situation-related constraints, you just get garbage. You're just going to be trying to boil the ocean, and you're there forever. So that's not the prescription side that I was talking about. What I'm talking about is I want to use data analytics, use it for different purposes, but I want to try to see if I can find out should I be selling shoes at all, not who should I be selling shoes to. That's a different question. That's a strategic question. Should I be in this business at all? And the way you would do it is you go through the discovery process, but you would change your frame of reference. That is, I'm looking at this thing. I always say that if you look at this bottle, if I show it to you this way, you only see the character and label. That's all you know. If I turn it around, then you see what's in it. So changing the frame of reference means that I'm going to go around this thing using analytics, discovering, but then I'm going to get a full picture of this bottle. And then I can say, yes, I'm going to prescribe this and get there. And how do I now optimize selling more shoes to that guy? How do I optimize selling more water to that guy? How do I optimize my finances? How do I optimize my marketing? How do I optimize my advertising dollars and so forth? Does that help?
I think that's very good. I think you raised some very interesting points.
I definitely agree, everything is at some level bounded, right? But to sort of piggyback off your shoes and water bottle, maybe the same machinery that we use for making shoes today could better be used for making belts. But you need different data to answer that second question, right?
Absolutely.
Only your shoe data is not going to get you there.
Absolutely. The long sentence that Gary started reading in my resume, I said, I have no idea what that is. It's exertive strategy concept.
That's what that means.
It's the exertive strategy concept, and it is exactly that. It says formulating strategies and the execution of that strategy powered by data analytics. So data analytics is not the objective. The objective is the strategy.
Right. And that's very much where I was fully agreeing is, you know, if your data analytics doesn't lead to a different choice for you, a different strategy, a different decision, then no point.
I think one thing I'd like to add to what Sid mentioned.
Then we'll take the next question.
Okay.
No, you can
So what you mentioned, prescriptive analytics. That prescription implies action. You've got to do something with the data, and the action is going to be very specific to the context. And it's not theory, it's not curiosity. So there was this example which I saw the other day from a professor in Maryland or someone. He talked about there's being a strong correlation between intelligence and people who put a like on curly fries from whatever, Carl's Jr. or something on Facebook. So people said, hey, there's a strong correlation between smart people and those who like curly fries. Now, there are different ways that people interpret this. Yeah.
There's an article on curly fries analytics.
Yeah. So see that's a correlation, and you can debate all you want between correlation and causation, all that kind of stuff. But here is the practical implementation of it. So this professor from Maryland, I forgot her name, what she said was, if you're going to use this to be able to reach smart people on Facebook, narrow down your search, that's probably a good way to do that. But if you're going to use it to ask your kid to eat more curly fries so that you become smart, that's a bad use of that. So the question is, that's how I like the prescription part of it more. You better know what you do with it.
I was having my kid eat
So the action.
Let's take another question. I don't want to spend all
I
that.
have to say at least one thing, Gary. Putting Spotfire in the hand of someone that doesn't know how to ask the deeper question isn't going to solve anything. You have to have a better analyst or better scientist, a better thinker
To know what to do with it.
with the tool.
Right.
So giving someone a better tool isn't going to get your organization forward, especially a typical analyst running Excel and Access.
Neil?
So I'm coming from the IoT domain, Internet of Things.
Can everyone hear him? Okay.
Are you able to hear me
Is there a
back there?
microphone?
Okay.
Good.
So
Good.
and by the way, I have on Skype the CEO of a company called Recall, which is in analytics, but
Is his name N. Rao Machraju?
yes, Rao Machraju. It's an MIT Media Lab spinoff.
You had an Apple company.
Yeah, he was.
So we are
Apple,
scheduling someone said we can do it.
So his question, I'm coming from IoT and I want to come back to the trillion devices and something that Shirish, you just said up front before you went into curly fries, brought that point, you know, what you do with it. But Rao's question is, what is your prediction 5 years out, and let's be bold, 10 years out, where big data, what domain will big data truly make its mark and truly excel in? Is there any, guess to that, or are you just waiting for sort of that all to fall out?
I have a very simplistic approach to predictions. It's like wherever the money is going to be. It's like the Willie Sutton of robbing banks. Where the money is, that's what's going to grow. And not because, and it's more like I think on a more serious note, Sid mentioned earlier about quick wins and early wins. A series of quick wins builds up the ability of people to take risks and invest more and more in that area. You may have a cure for like very non-linear, very effective cures out, but if they don't have the momentum or they don't have the buy-in from the community or the stakeholders in it, it's not going to happen. So wherever people see quick wins and see what we may call instant gratification and tangible line of sight to money, those are the areas that are going to grow.
So can I just say, is healthcare, because of wearables, because they're on you, and people are sort of doing more and more things with imprinted tattoos that are sensing whatever is going on and so on. Is that healthcare arena something you see as a quick win or a medium-sized area for?
That's an area of interest for us, for our company personally, so I would say yes. And it's not because of the variables or because of IoT, it's because of the multi-trillion dollar money that's at stake.
But is it really quick?
So much money, sorry?
Is it really quick?
Well, even if you do a little bit, the amount of money that you can make with a very small dent in that is so huge that that's likely to have that's where a lot of the impact is likely to happen. That's the reason we're in that business.
So what about you, Sid?
Yeah, I think if the question is which domain is the best, I think healthcare, energy, particularly water.
Yeah.
Those are lots of money, there's big needs, there's big stuff going on.
Distribution.
That's the
Distribution,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
If the question is be bold and say what would you see as the nature of applications of analytics, I would say 10 years I see things being connected together. And this is what I mean. We as human beings, see, enterprise has been run as an isolated events in time. We do a strategy, then we take a bunch of pictures, we do a survey, we build our strategy, we put some budget against it, and then we execute. But the world around us constantly changing. Our competitors are sitting there trying to see, well, let's all hang for the next 24 months and execute on our strategies, and we'll come back and change our position. That's not the case. Newcomers come in. The economy changes. There's lots and lots of stuff. So this notion that the enterprise is kind of statically, it's kind of in steps, if you would, jumping. It's hopping, as opposed to it's a picture.
Yeah.
It's not a movie. Where you and I, as human beings, we are a movie. We get in our car, we strategize. We want to go back home, boom, the freeway is closed, the traffic is high. We look at Google, that's analytics. We listen to radio, that's analytics. We look at the signals that we get from our eyes and where the traffic is, that's analytics. We incorporate it, we immediately react, we come up with a new strategy. I think, given the Internet of Things and the device connectivities, connected with things that are coming in from consumer behaviors, connected from the patient stuff, connected with all of our lives being connected, the enterprise is going to be forced to act in a much more agile manner because it's connected and everything would be in a different fashion optimized. As
Predictive too.
Much more predictive, much more, you see a lot of things that's happening now. I know what kind of coffee you want or what kind of shoes you want, but this would go far beyond that. Because I'm getting more signals about you and the enterprise.
I wanted to build on that for a second. Just ask the audience a question and ask this guys a question. How many of you in this room have seen the Minority Report? Okay, so the question to the panel is, will we see Minority Report come to fruition in our lifetime?
I don't think you'll see Minority Report, but you may see Majority Report. It's slightly, I don't know how I think...
The idea being people walk around looking like Anil all day, and no offense, and we'll see things in the world, walking through things, everything's going to be in front of us, and we'll have to deal with the virtual reality, which becomes a physical reality.
You are going to see cars without drivers. That's within reach. It's not that far away. 2018, they're authorized to drive, and Google is going to put 100,000 of them in the field. So you're going to see a lot of things that is predictive when you get up in terms of what you do. But I don't know, see, because the Minority Report has a negative connotation that you can predict, for example, a crime happening before it's happening, and then you can, so it's, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
But I think it's possible to predict people's behavior, and they're doing it in Israel. Now, today, it's not a dream, it's not an illusion, it's being done. The scale of it would just be.
So actually there are two aspects of Minority Report saying that can happen. One aspect of it is targeted advertising. When you walk around, you get target stuff. That's already happening to you. In case you haven't noticed, on your Google call or you go to your browser, you get all that's targeted is already happening. But I guess the more important part about is what you mentioned about pre-crime. Law enforcement coming in and stopping somebody before he commits a murder. That's a governance issue. It's what you do with the data that you have rather than the data itself. Now, if governance happens to be that if there's a 90% chance somebody's going to kill somebody, he can be arrested. That's the law. then we go off and there may be a different direction to it. So a lot of this, I think, what I just mentioned earlier is kind of relevant. A fool with a tool is still a fool, right?
Dangerous.
It's still, and that is why even more dangerous. So the tools are great, but if you don't have smart people actually implementing them or smart people governing them, then it could be you could go in a lot of different directions, and that's what's going to determine whether the impact it's going to have in the industry rather than anything else.
Let me kind of add one point. Justin, you had mentioned about people just aggressively hiring data scientists and so forth, and I've seen that as well. The problem is now that we're saying, hey, we have 64 data scientists, therefore it's all done. That's not. I mean, these are usually mathematicians coming out. They don't know the domain. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're optimizing for the sake of optimizing. So that's a problem. Just like we're saying, hey, it's the technology. Now we're saying, let's go hire data scientists, and therefore that's the problem. It's what I guess some folks call augmented intelligence. It's the combination of the two, in the right blended thing that gives you the best marinara sauce, has X amount of meat, X amount of tomatoes in it, the right kind of pepper, the right kind of salt, and that's what's going to create. It's not just let's go get Teradata and hope let's all go home. We're going to be great. You would like that, but that's not going to happen. Or let's go hire all these data scientists, put them in the back room, and boom, we're done. We're now world-class data analytics.
I mean, Justin, I went to a Microsoft CIO conference a few years ago. I forgot the name of the term, but it was almost, they were creating a home environment that it almost like the lighting in the room would change based upon the mood that they perceived me to be in. And they knew I wanted a cup of coffee brewed in a certain way, at a certain time, in a certain position, in a certain cup. So it's that predictive nature that's coming into our home. Are you seeing or hearing any things in the consumer goods space?
So we're already doing in the manufacturing space predictive downtime for shop floor equipment based on past behavior and age and all kinds of other attributes that are going into that. Also, with a aerospace company predicting service on engines and other parts based on historical data, as well as other inputs in terms of weather, age, and whatnot. So that's definitely going to be a growth area, especially for companies like Teradata that have the predictive nature in its technology and also the capacity to really handle the large volumes of data and really process that quickly.
And the money to invest in it. Yeah. It helps to.
Tesla and this car, basically.
Yeah, Tesla. And you're like a walking advertisement for analytics is what I'm saying. No.
So, one comment on Sid when he mentioned that connecting together. So I was started on wireless services, and I got a call from our company, hey, let's use big data in telecom. I said, okay, that's good, but they didn't have any clue. They wanted to use cloud data and all that. But domain knowledge is very important.
Yeah.
But one thing that you pointed out, Sid, is I think is a big win in big data is connecting different enterprise. So let's examine like some SARS, like some CDC, some plane, and connecting and say, and you want to see how it's spread, and connecting telecom CDRs, like if somebody else got some SARS somewhere else, and doing some fencing along that. So if you see a disease that's spreading, and then you can see, take some telecom CDR records and see who got it and where they have gone, and connecting those together, that's very powerful. And I think that's where the big data will become very powerful. And especially across nations or some in healthcare and technology combination together.
I think a good example of that is the company you mentioned where they were looking at predicting weather, but that's not what they used it for.
Yeah.
They used it for a different purpose. And that's, I think that's a very good example.
So that was not a question, that was a statement and confirming, so yes, you're right. There's a question back there in the back, the gentleman in the blue shirt.
Thank you. I remember the comment about the, maybe it's the wrong word, but the possible conflict between the consumer goods makers and consumer goods retailers. That's nothing new. That's the extent of data available to the retailer because they are, the point of sale has been true since the scanner was put into use. And that was over 20 years ago. Do you see any technology or any other development that could break through that wall? Because I don't see the manufacturers having access to that data.
What answer that? Well, yes, there is. I mean, social media gives you a straight window into the world of what's happening. And it gives you not only the what's happening, it gives you geospatial and temporal information, which has a lot of predictive value. And that can give you sort of numbers associated with it. So the issue is point of sale data has been like very important, and the ways of collecting it have been around for years. Nielsen, Walmart, IMS, all these guys do that. But this new kind of instrumentation with social media gives you the ability to collect what you may call pattern of life. If you go back to the example of LL, they do collect other information which can validate that in a much better way. So the big deal in going forward is going to be instrumentation, your mobile phone, your Twitter accounts. And I think, Giri, you mentioned earlier about being able to figure out what food can be ingested. I know two companies who have invented molecular spectroscopy, which can be used on phones. They're about a year away from development, but that lets you measure, do Raman spectrograph on your food, and tell you exactly what you're eating. So that's the kind of stuff that instrumentation is going to make all the difference.
I'll add on to that. So we talked about Spotfire earlier in a discovery type environment. So that is happening today. But the CPG companies don't know what to do with social data. They've got Facebook, Twitter, blogs, wikis, all kinds of social listening, tons of data, not making sense of it, and don't really know how to use it with structured data. For example, what cases of Coke or Pepsi or Anheuser-Busch products or Miller Coors, any of those that went into a retail store. So trying to match up structured with unstructured in a discovery environment, like with Spotfire on top of it, is a great setup because it does allow those that can ask those types of questions to try to look and see if there are linkages between those different disparate types of data. They're hoping and leaning into that to get away from having to buy Nielsen or IRI data, which is really the only source outside of point of sale, as you mentioned, to give you insight into what's happening in the actual retail store. And the problem with Nielsen or IRI data is it's weeks and sometimes months late. It's not to the detail that you would need to really make a decision on consumer behavior. The other thing that I would say is that type of data, the social/unstructured data is becoming more important in terms of innovation or product innovation and early indicators into product preferences, especially when you're rolling out new products or trial of new products to see if it's going to work or not before you spend exorbitant amounts of money on rolling out a product that's not going to sell. Because most consumer goods products have a date on them, if you notice on most products. If it doesn't sell, the retailer sends it back, and it's a big write-off for a lot of CPG companies.
One more perspective on that. And of course, my colleagues' answers are accurate, but it assumes that you are somewhat modern, you have a mobile device, you surf the net. Let's assume you've been living under a rock for the last 50 years, you woke up, and you had none of what I just talked about. You're still a human being with a pulse, you have to walk into a brick and mortar store. The technologies are in place today. When you go into a store, you can track geothermal activity, where you walk, how much time you spend in a certain aisle, knowing what is in that end cap and what products are that have the highest margins, arranging it to make it visually appealing. It's being if Dan, I know your name is Dan Grunspan, spent more time in this particular aisle, then we know that you're probably more interested in that. We could then there send someone over there to entice you to buy that or give you an upsell or join some promotion. So there's always a way that is disruptive, that is not point of sale, that's in store, in real time.
Yeah.
You're right, it's still in store, but it's still, that data is still the property of the store, not
That's right,
the
retailer.
CPG data.
Right.
It stays in the retail space. And I'm talking about really a political divide.
Yeah.
A structural barrier between the two.
That divide is not coming down. There has not been decreasing. In fact, it's only increasing. The retailers want to start charging the consumer goods companies for their data.
Absolutely.
The retail and the CPG companies are not willing to pay, especially loyalty card data.
How we're doing in Tamil? Or someone who's
No,
actually...
we should be ending now.
Okay, so I'm going to give the panelists an opportunity to send in closing comments. We've had a lot of questions asked and a lot of themes. So Justin, starting with you, any closing comments you want to end the evening with?
This is just a great time to be in this space. If you're working in this space or tangentially associated to it, whether it's BI, data management, data cleansing, reporting analytics, I mean, this is definitely a growth area, not just in the next year or two, but it's been growing since back in the early and mid 90s when it was called performance management and activity-based management and balanced scorecards and whatnot, and it is only accelerating now. So I would encourage you, if you are in the space or you're working in it, to continue to invest in following the trends and understanding what's happening, because I think it's good for your career, quite frankly.
Sid?
Agreed.
All right. Shortest comment I've heard all night. Sharif?
Actually, let me just put in a simple question to ask yourself, which is, what can you do with technology or everything that's available, which was impossible to do before? Because if you can create the impossible to the possible, then you're definitely adding value. And it's not a question of it could be done with like 100 computers or millions of computers linked together. Just make the difference between what is possible and what is not possible before, which can be done with technology. That's the thing to look for. If you're trying to create value, look for those opportunities to add value in your company or as an entrepreneur or even as a corporate executive.
Let me give you Tom's perspective, and I'll say something from my behalf as well. Again, Tom regretted that he could not be here, but he does think that this particular economy is rich with opportunities, a lot of untapped potential in this space, and he wants to lend his hand and is willing to come back and get more involved in some local activities in the analytics space. So it's an open offer. Maybe we can take him up at sometime in the future. It's been, I think, just want to say something. I think we could have probably talked about this another 3 hours, but unfortunately we have to end right now. I want to thank you, Justin, coming across the country, and you from coming up from the Bay Area, and yourself coming up from down from Orange County. I think it's been a very good, insightful session. Clearly, analytics is here to stay. There's a lot more we could cover, and I have a feeling if we have this session next year or 2 years from now, the topics may be entirely different, but clearly it's going to be evolving, and it's going to be becoming more and more mainstream, for sure. So with that, thank you very much for
a wonderful panel, and I have to quickly add that Giri actually reached out and said, would you like to hear about this? And I'm so glad that you did do that, and you got such a stellar panel. And I know Tom would have been also good to have in here, but I'm sure, like me, all of you appreciated what they said and how timely it is, and there's a lot of opportunity here. So before I want to make a couple of other comments, but I'd like to acknowledge our panel with a few gifts for them. Please join me in an applause for them. Thank you again. Bye.